which means it is time for another folktale. And lately, we've been talking about stories about different places around the world. Well, today, I'm going to tell you a story I've been telling my kids for many, many years. And it's about this famous ghost ship by the name of Lady Lovibond. And actually, the craziest part about this is we love to buy these books, like I've told you before, these like National Geographic books that talk about mysteries and about Earth. And we were reading through this book and we came across the story of the Lady Lovibond in this book. And so if it's in here, then I have to share it with you because it's one of those stories that's super interesting. And there's still more questions than there are answers. So sit back, get ready, here we go. So a captain by the name of Simon Reed was the person who would steer and drive the Lady Lovibond. And now Captain Reed was known as a very generous, kind, happy captain. His crew loved him. So one day, while they were off the coast of Kent and they were unloading all the goods that they were bringing back from one of their last trips, he saw this girl in the village, in the town. And it was the most beautiful girl he had ever seen. And he could not take his eyes off of her. So all day he saw her shopping through the village and the town, and all day he tried to talk up the nerve to go up and talk to her because you see, he was very poor. He didn't make a lot of money. He loves being a captain. He loves being on the water. That's why he did that job. However, he didn't get to make a lot of money in that time. And by the look of the things, this lady was beautiful. She was dressed very nicely. It looked like she had a good amount of money. So he was very intimidated to go up to her because he was thinking to himself, I can't compete with all these other guys here with all these tailored suits and all this money. So all day he sat back until finally he couldn't resist going up and talking to her. So he tried to make himself as presentable as possible, and he got the nerve, and he started walking into the town, and he tapped her on the shoulder. He said, excuse me, I just have to be very forward with you, and I hope you don't take this the wrong way, but I think you're the most beautiful person I've ever seen. What's your name? And she looked at him, and she was not used to men being so blunt with her, and she said, hi, my name is Anita. And he goes, well, Anita, I would love to talk with you some more if you have the time. And she said, well, sure. So for the rest of the afternoon, they walked to different shops, tasting things and shopping and just talking all along the way. And by the end of the night, they were both so entranced by one another in this conversation and this day that they had together that they decided they were going to secretly meet up the next day. Now, I say secretly meet up because this is the thing. Anita came from a very wealthy family in town, full of lots of nobles. So no, they weren't like royalty. However, they had a lot of money and they were part of the town and the politics and they were able to go to court. And so it was expected that Anita would marry somebody of very high stature or someone who was very respected and had a lot of money in their town. And you see, Simon was not that. However, they had this connection, a connection that they could not push away. So the next day they decided they were going to sneak around and they were going to meet up and spend more time together. Well, eventually, every time Simon would come back into town, they would find this secret meeting spot and they would meet and spend time together. And over time, they ended up falling in love with each other. And one day, Simon got the nerve up and he proposed to her and said, I want to get married to you. But he knew in order for him to marry him, he was going to have to go talk to her father, all right? And this could go one of two ways. Either the father could love his daughter and say, I want you to be able to marry for true love, or he would say, you're no longer allowed to see my daughter again, and they would never get to see each other. And so that day, he went up there, he got the nerve, and he went and spoke to her father. And it was very rare back in the day that people got to marry for love. It was more for how can I increase my wealth? How can I get a better job? But this father was not like majority of the people in that town. And he said, well, if you'll treat my daughter with respect and you love her, I will support this union and I'll even give you enough money to start your own life with my daughter. And he was blown away. And he said, I promise you, sir, I will always look after her. I will always take care of her and do whatever I can. So the father gave his peace and they were set to be married. So they had this grand wedding, and Simon invited all of his crewmen, and Anita brought all of her friends, and their families came together, and it was this huge big shindig, this huge big celebration. And in order to truly celebrate the family, they were going to go on this cruise on Lady Lovibond all around the coast that would lead them to Portugal, where they would celebrate and have their honeymoon. Well, the father gave his peace, and as a wedding gift, he gave them this huge chest. And so they opened up the chest, and inside for jewels and gold and money, and enough that they could start their own life and would always be set and comfortable for the rest of their life. And they were so grateful and so thankful, so they brought this money onto the ship, and they were going to take it with them on their honeymoon in the hopes of starting a new life. And so everybody, all their friends and their family, load onto Lady Lovibond, where they would go on this cruise to Portugal, and they were going to have this huge celebration. However, there was a first mate by the name of John Rivers, and he was a rival. He was very, very, very jealous of Simon. For one, he thought Anita was beautiful. He wanted her for himself. And two, he was very poor, and he was very, very jealous that Simon was going to get all this money. He thought he was the one that deserved that, and he had missed his chance. So he started scheming up this plan. All right? So on the night of February 13th, 1748, everyone loads onto this cruise ship. And they're going out in the bay around Kent, and they're making their way towards Portugal, and they're having all this food, and they're having wonderful drink, and there's music going on, and everyone's celebrating. When John calls Simon onto the deck and says, "I need to speak with you," and he goes, "I want you to bring Anita with you." Okay, so they go out there, and at the time, Simon had no idea that John was not happy with him or envied him or was very jealous of him. So he went up there without question. And they're up there, and John's saying, "Oh, come this way, follow me." And they're like, okay. And so they're walking along the outside of the boat until they get to the front of the boat, right where the edge goes over into the water. And they're talking, and John says, out of blue, "This should have been mine." And Simon's like, "What are you talking about?" He's like, "This should all be mine." And at this time, they're kind of, Simon and Anita are starting to understand and realize that something is not right. And all of a sudden, John starts fighting Simon, and they all go overboard, and with them goes the treasure. Okay, well, a few days go by. Their ship is supposed to be docked off the coast of Portugal, but it never shows up. And so they send out search parties, they send out people looking, thinking, oh, maybe they made a detour, but no, they were never able to find the ship again, all right? And so they sent out people, they sent out different ships, they did this for a long time. And to this day, they'd never been able to find the ship again. However, 50 years goes by. It's February 13th, 1798, and there's a captain by the name of James Westlake who was on his own, I would say expedition, because he was touring the area when he saw what looked like the ship. And so he tries to get closer to it, but as he tries to get closer, the ship gets further away. And he tries to go a little bit closer, and the ship looks farther away. And he goes to his men, and he said, "Am I seeing things? Do you guys see something?" And he said, no, I see something. It looks like a real ship. However, it almost looks like it's giving off this eerie glow. And so he writes about it, and they continue on their journey. Well, 50 years goes by. And another captain was out there in that same area on that same night, and he writes the same thing in his journal. "I spotted a boat. The closer I tried to get, the further it tried to get away from me, and it had this eerie white glow." So this has happened on numerous occasions over the years, and it is said that every 50 years, Lady Lovibond comes back and haunts the waters because of that bad first mate, that John Rivers, who basically threw the treasure, threw the people overboard, and because of that, the ship went down. Because I forgot to mention that back in the day, there was this myth that if you brought a female on board, they were bad luck and bad things would happen. Well, they had a female on board, and guess what happened? They never made it to their destination. The gold is somehow missing, and the ship has never been found. So that's the story of Lady Lovibond. It is sunken somewhere. It is cruising somewhere. No one knows. But today is February 9th. We are 4 days away from the anniversary. So on February 13th, I'm going to start doing some research and see, does anyone see this ship? Is it fact? Is it fiction? Is it a myth? No one knows. But that's the story of Lady Lovibond.